The vastness of space was a canvas of endless black, punctuated only by the faint glow of distant stars. Out here, where silence reigned supreme and light took centuries to travel, humanity's reach had stretched farther than ever before. But even in this age of exploration, there were mysteries that defied explanation. Captain Ilara Voss leaned forward in her command chair aboard the Cronus, her sharp green eyes fixed on the holographic display hovering above the control panel. Her scout drone, designated SD-7, had sent back something extraordinary, a cluster of derelict ships drifting near the edge of an aging red giant star. The images were grainy but unmistakable. These weren't alien vessels, they were human-made. Yet their design was unlike anything she'd seen in her years serving the United Galactic Alliance. "Magnify Sector 3, she ordered, her voice steady despite the knot tightening in her stomach. The image zoomed in, revealing one of the larger ships. Its hull was sleek yet imposing, covered in intricate patterns that shimmered faintly even after millennia of exposure to cosmic radiation. Strange symbols adorned its surface, writing no one alive could decipher. Whatever these ships were, they belonged to a time long forgotten. "They're massive," muttered Lieutenant Jarek, the ship's engineer, his fingers dancing over the console as he analyzed the data streaming in. "Each one is at least twice the size of our largest dreadnoughts." "And old," added Dr. Mira Khalid, the mission's chief historian, her tone tinged with awe. "Look at the wear on the outer plating. This fleet has been out here for centuries, maybe longer." Ilara frowned. "Centuries doesn't explain the tech we're seeing. Those energy signatures, they're advanced, far beyond what we use today. And those markings," she paused, pointing to the strange glyphs. "That's not just another language, it's a dialect of ancient Terran." Mira's eyes widened. "Terran? You mean old Earth? But that would make these ships 1,000,000 years old," Ilara finished quietly, her mind racing. Humanity had spread across the stars over the last few thousand years, but evidence of such advanced civilization existing so long ago was unheard of. What kind of people had built these ships? Why had they come here? And most importantly, what had happened to them? As if answering her unspoken questions, the sensors began picking up faint power fluctuations emanating from the fleet. At first, it seemed like static interference, but then came the undeniable truth. Some of the ships were waking up. Lights flickered across their darkened hulls, and dormant systems hummed back to life. "What the hell?" Jarek exclaimed, leaning closer to his screen. "These things are powering on. How is that even possible?" Ilara straightened, her instincts kicking in. "Prepare a boarding party. We need answers, and fast." Minutes later, a small team led by Ilara stepped onto one of the colossal vessels via an airlock. The interior was dimly lit, the walls lined with panels displaying cryptic symbols. A soft hum filled the air, vibrating through their boots. Everything felt alive, as though the ship itself was watching them. It didn't take long to find the source of the activity. In a central chamber, a holographic projection flickered to life, showing a man in Arctic military attire addressing what appeared to be a crew. His words were garbled, but his expression spoke volumes: urgency, fear, determination. "This changes everything," Mira whispered, her voice trembling. "If these ships are real, then everything we thought we knew about our history, it's wrong." Ilara nodded grimly. They had stumbled upon something monumental, something that could rewrite the story of humanity itself. But as the lights around them grew brighter, one thing became clear. Whatever secrets lay hidden within this ancient fleet, they weren't going to stay buried forever. The air inside the ancient battleship was thick with anticipation. Captain Ilara Voss and her team moved cautiously through its labyrinthine corridors, their boots echoing softly against the metallic floor. The ship seemed alive, its systems humming faintly as if awakening from a long slumber. Every step revealed more wonders: control panels that glowed faintly despite centuries of disuse, walls etched with intricate designs, and holographic displays flickering to life without warning. "This place, it's like stepping into a dream," murmured Dr. Mira Khalid, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes darted across the walls, taking in every detail. "These symbols, they're not just decorative. They tell a story." Ilara nodded but kept her focus sharp. Something about this ship felt off, as though it wasn't entirely abandoned. She motioned for Lieutenant Jarek, the engineer, to examine a nearby console. "Can you make sense of any of this?" Jarek knelt down, his fingers brushing over the smooth surface of the panel. It lit up under his touch, displaying streams of data in an unfamiliar script. He frowned, adjusting his handheld scanner. "It's some kind of log system. I can't read the language, but the tech is incredible. This interface is leagues ahead of anything we've got back home." As he worked, another hologram sprang to life nearby. This one showed a man standing on what appeared to be a bridge, addressing a group of officers. His face was stern, his uniform adorned with insignias that hinted at high rank. Though the audio was garbled, fragments of words emerged: retreat, enemy, survival. Mira leaned closer, her brow furrowed. "That's definitely old terrain. Whoever these people were, they were fleeing something or someone." Suddenly, a loud hiss echoed through the corridor. Everyone froze, hands instinctively reaching for their sidearms. The sound came again, louder this time, followed by a mechanical whirring. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a chamber filled with rows of cylindrical pods. Inside each pod floated human figures, suspended in a clear liquid that shimmered faintly. "Cryogenic stasis," Jarek breathed, stepping forward. "They've been asleep all this time." Ilara approached cautiously, her heart pounding. One of the pods began to glow, and the liquid drained away. The figure inside, a tall man with graying hair and sharp features, stirred. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then widening in shock as he took in his surroundings. "Where am I?" he rasped, his voice hoarse from disuse. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Lights flashed red, and the hum of machinery grew louder. On the walls, screens displayed warnings in the same cryptic script they'd seen earlier. Whatever had been dormant within this fleet was now fully awake, and it didn't seem happy about being disturbed. "We need to get out of here," Jarek shouted, already heading back toward the airlock. But Ilara hesitated. The man in the pod was struggling to sit up, confusion and fear etched across his face. Against her better judgment, she reached out to help him. "You're safe," she said firmly, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "We're here to help." The man grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "No time," he gasped. "The shards, they're coming." "The shards," Mira repeated, exchanging a worried glance with Jarek. "What are you talking about?" But before the man could answer, the ship shuddered violently. Metal groaned, and sparks flew from overloaded circuits. The holograms around them flickered wildly, showing fragmented images of crystalline shapes advancing through space. "We triggered something," Ilara realized, her stomach sinking. "This isn't just a derelict fleet, it's a weapon. And we just turned it on." The man staggered to his feet, his eyes blazing with urgency. "Listen to me. My name is Admiral Cal Rennick. If you want to live, you'll do exactly as I say. We don't have much time." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ilara nodded, gripping her weapon tightly. Whatever nightmare they had awakened, they would face it together, for now. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had unleashed something far beyond their understanding. Admiral Cal Rennick moved with surprising agility for someone who had just awakened from a million-year slumber. His piercing blue eyes scanned the team, taking in their modern uniforms and weapons. He seemed both fascinated and wary, as though unsure whether to trust them or prepare for battle. "You're not from my time," he stated bluntly, his voice carrying authority despite its roughness. "Tell me, what year is it?" Ilara exchanged a glance with Mira before answering. It's the year 12,478 by Galactic Standard Time. Rennick froze, his jaw tightening. For a moment, he looked like he might collapse again. When he finally spoke, his tone was heavy with disbelief. 1,000,000 years. We've been gone that long. Mira stepped forward cautiously. We don't know much about your era, Admiral. Most of our history only goes back a few thousand years. Your fleet, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. Rennick nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the glowing panels around them. This fleet wasn't built for exploration. It was built for survival. And war. He turned back to face them, his expression grim. You need to understand something. The shards aren't just an enemy. They're a plague. A force that consumes everything in their path. Consumes? Jarek asked, his brow furrowed. What do you mean? Are they some kind of alien species? They're crystalline entities, Rennick explained, his voice low and urgent. They don't just destroy civilizations. They assimilate them. Everything they touch becomes part of their hive mind. Memories, knowledge, culture, all absorbed into their collective consciousness. That's why we fled. We couldn't stop them. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Ilara broke the silence first. If they're so dangerous, why didn't anyone warn us? Why isn't there any record of them in our history? Rennick sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Because we erased ourselves. To protect what remained of humanity, we scattered across galaxies, leaving no trace behind. This fleet was one of many sent on suicide missions to buy time for others to escape. I thought we'd failed. His eyes hardened. But now we're awake again, which means the shards must still be out there, and they'll find us soon enough. As if on cue, the ship trembled violently. Alarms blared louder, and red lights flashed across the corridors. On the holographic displays, strange patterns began to form, shimmering shapes that resembled jagged crystals floating in space. They're here, Rennick said grimly, gripping the edge of a console for support. I don't know how, but they've tracked us. Ilara barked orders, her training kicking in. Jarek, get us back to the Cronus. Mira, see if you can access more logs while we move. Admiral, stay close. You're coming with us. But Rennick hesitated. No, not yet. There's something you need to see first. Without waiting for permission, he strode toward another section of the ship, motioning for them to follow. They entered a vast chamber filled with rows of cryopods similar to the one he'd emerged from. Many were cracked open, their occupants long dead, but others still contained figures suspended in stasis. These are survivors, Rennick said, his voice tinged with hope and sorrow. Some of them might still be alive. If we can revive them, we'll have a fighting chance. Mira knelt beside one of the pods, examining the controls. Reviving them won't be easy. Their bodies have been frozen for 1,000,000 years. Even if we succeed, they'll need time to recover. We don't have time. Rennick snapped, his frustration boiling over. The shards don't wait. They hunt. And when they find us, they won't stop until every last one of us is gone. Ilara placed a calming hand on his shoulder. We'll do what we can, but you need to trust us, Admiral. You're not alone anymore. Rennick stared at her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. As the team worked to reactivate the pods, the ship continued to shake violently. Whatever awaited them outside, it was clear that their discovery of this ancient fleet had awakened more than just ghosts. It had reignited a war that should have ended eons ago. The battle against the shards raged on, both outside and within. Laser fire erupted from the ancient fleet's turrets, slicing through the crystalline invaders as they clawed at the hull. Inside the ship, tension simmered between the modern humans and the newly awakened crew. While they fought side by side to repel the immediate threat, cracks were beginning to form in their fragile alliance. Admiral Rennick stood on the bridge of the flagship, his eyes locked onto the holographic displays showing the shards' relentless assault. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. "We can't keep this up," he growled. "They're too strong. We need to fall back. Regroup." Ilara stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Fall back where?" "To Earth. Your people have been gone for 1,000,000 years, Admiral. Humanity has changed. If we bring this fight to them unprepared, it could destabilize everything we've built." Rennick turned to face her, his expression stormy. "And what's your plan, Captain?" "Sit here and wait for the shards to pick us off one by one." "That's not survival. That's suicide." Before Ilara could respond, Captain Vera interjected, her tone sharp. "Kale, she's right. These people don't know what we're dealing with. Rushing into another war without understanding the stakes will only lead to more death." Darius, the burly engineer, slammed his fist against a console. "Death is coming either way. You think sitting around debating strategy is going to stop those things out there?" He pointed toward the viewport, where shards of crystal glinted menacingly as they swarmed the fleet. The argument escalated quickly, voices overlapping in frustration. Some of the revived crew sided with Rennick, insisting that humanity had no choice but to confront the shards head-on. Others agreed with Ilara, cautioning against reckless action. The divide grew deeper, threatening to fracture the uneasy truce that had held them together thus far. Mira, who had been quietly observing the chaos, finally spoke up. "Enough." Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. Everyone turned to look at her. She stepped closer, holding up a datapad. "This isn't helping anyone. Look, I've found something important in the ship's archives. There's mention of a weapon designed specifically to combat the shards. A frequency disruptor capable of breaking their hive mind connection." "That's great," Jurek muttered sarcastically. "Except we don't have time to build some fancy gadget while those things are tearing us apart." "But maybe we do," Mira countered, her eyes narrowing. "If we work together, combining our knowledge and resources, we might stand a chance. But splitting into factions, that's exactly what the shards want, to divide us so they can destroy us." Her word hung heavy in the air. For a moment, silence fell over the room. Rennick exchanged a glance with Vera, then sighed deeply. "Fine. We'll try it your way. For now. But if this fails, I'm taking my fleet and finishing what we started 1,000,000 years ago." Ilara nodded reluctantly. "Agreed. Let's focus on surviving first. Then we can figure out the next step." With tempers cooled, for the moment, the two groups set aside their differences and began working together. Mira and Jurek collaborated with Darius and other engineers from the ancient fleet, poring over schematics and salvaging parts to construct the disruptor. Meanwhile, Ilara coordinated defensive efforts, ensuring that the fleet remained intact long enough to complete the project. As the hours passed, progress was slow but steady, yet the shards showed no signs of relenting. Their attacks grew more aggressive, probing deeper into the fleet's defenses. It became clear that they weren't just trying to destroy. They were searching for something specific, something hidden within the ancient ships. Late into the night, Ilara found herself alone on the observation deck, staring out at the endless void. Behind her, Admiral Rennick approached silently. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. "You remind me of someone," he said softly. "A leader I once knew. She believed in unity above all else, even when it seemed impossible." Ilara glanced at him, surprised by the rare glimpse of vulnerability. "Did she succeed?" Rennick hesitated, then shook his head. "No, but maybe you will." Outside, the shards continued their relentless advance, their glittering forms casting eerie reflections across the viewport. The clock was ticking, and the weight of their mission pressed down on everyone. Unity or division, it would define not only their survival, but the fate of humanity itself. The battle against the shards raged on, both outside and within. Laser fire erupted from the ancient fleet's turrets, slicing through the crystalline invaders as they clawed at the hull. Inside the ship, tension simmered between the modern humans, and the newly awakened crew. While they fought side by side to repel the immediate threat, cracks were beginning to form in their fragile alliance. Admiral Rennick stood on the bridge of the flagship, his eyes locked onto the holographic displays, showing the Shard's relentless assault. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. "We can't keep this up," he growled. "They're too strong. We need to fall back, regroup." Ilara stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Fall back where? To Earth? Your people have been gone for 1,000,000 years, Admiral. Humanity has changed. If we bring this fight to them unprepared, it could destabilize everything we've built." Rennick turned to face her, his expression stormy. "And what's your plan, Captain? Sit here and wait for the Shards to pick us off one by one? That's not survival. That's suicide." Before Ilara could respond, Captain Vera interjected, her tone sharp. "Kale, she's right. These people don't know what we're dealing with. Rushing into another war without understanding the stakes will only lead to more death." Darius, the burly engineer, slammed his fist against a console. "Death is coming either way. You think sitting around debating strategy is going to stop those things out there?" He pointed toward the viewport, where shards of crystal glinted menacingly as they swarmed the fleet. The argument escalated quickly, voices overlapping in frustration. Some of the revived crew sided with Rennick, insisting that humanity had no choice but to confront the shards head-on. Others agreed with Ilara, cautioning against reckless action. The divide grew deeper, threatening to fracture the uneasy truce that had held them together thus far. Mira, who had been quietly observing the chaos, finally spoke up. "Enough." Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. Everyone turned to look at her. She stepped closer, holding up a datapad. "This isn't helping anyone. Look, I've found something important in the ship's archives. There's mention of a weapon designed specifically to combat the shards, a frequency disruptor capable of breaking their hive-mind connection." "That's great," Jarek muttered sarcastically. "Except we don't have time to build some fancy gadget while those things are tearing us apart." "But maybe we do," Mira countered, her eyes narrowing. "If we work together, combining our knowledge and resources, we might stand a chance. But splitting into factions, that's exactly what the shards want, to divide us so they can destroy us." Her words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, silence fell over the room. Rennick exchanged a glance with Vera, then sighed deeply. "Fine. We'll try it your way, for now. But if this fails, I'm taking my fleet and finishing what we started 1,000,000 years ago." Ilara nodded reluctantly. "Agreed. Let's focus on surviving first. Then we can figure out the next step." With tempers cooled, for the moment, the two groups set aside their differences and began working together. Mira and Jarek collaborated with Darius and other engineers from the ancient fleet, poring over schematics and salvaging parts to construct the disruptor. Meanwhile, Ilara coordinated defensive efforts, ensuring that the fleet remained intact long enough to complete the project. As the hours passed, progress was slow but steady, yet the shards showed no signs of relenting. Their attacks grew more aggressive, probing deeper into the fleet's defenses. It became clear that they weren't just trying to destroy, they were searching for something specific, something hidden within the ancient ships. Late into the night, Ilara found herself alone on the observation deck, staring out at the endless void. Behind her, Admiral Rennick approached silently. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. "You remind me of someone," he said softly. "A leader I once knew. She believed in unity above all else, even when it seemed impossible." Ilara glanced at him, surprised by the rare glimpse of vulnerability. "Did she succeed?" Rennick hesitated, then shook his head. "No, but maybe you will." Outside, the shards continued their relentless advance, their glittering forms casting eerie reflections across the viewport. The clock was ticking, and the weight of their mission pressed down on everyone. Unity or division, it would define not only their survival, but the fate of humanity itself. The frequency disruptor was nearly complete, but time was running out. The shards had breached the outer defenses of the fleet, their jagged forms slicing through bulkheads and corridors with terrifying precision. Every corner of the ancient ships now echoed with the sound of alarms blaring and metal groaning under stress. The crew worked tirelessly, sweat dripping from their brows as they pieced together the final components of Mira's design. On the bridge of the flagship, Alara stood alongside Admiral Rennick, watching the holographic displays that showed the shards' relentless advance. The crystalline entities moved like a swarm, each shard pulsing faintly with an eerie blue light. They were no longer just attacking. They were infiltrating, spreading tendrils of corruption throughout the fleet. "They're inside," Rennick muttered, his voice low and grim. "If we don't deploy the disruptor soon, it won't matter how many ships we have left." Alara clenched her fists. "We need to buy more time. Can your people hold them off?" Rennick nodded sharply. "We'll do what we must, but you better make sure that weapon works." As he left to rally his troops, Alara turned to Mira and Jarek, who were hunched over the disruptor in the engineering bay. The device was a sleek, cylindrical contraption lined with glowing conduits and intricate circuitry. It looked fragile compared to the monstrous threat outside, but everyone knew it was their only hope. "How much longer?" Alara asked, her tone urgent. 5 minutes, Mira replied without looking up, her fingers flying across a control panel. "Maybe less if Jarek stops messing around with the wiring." "I'm not messing around." Jarek shot back, adjusting a connection. "I'm making sure this thing doesn't blow up in our faces." Alara took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. Shouts, explosions, the sharp crackle of energy weapons. She could feel the ship trembling beneath her feet as the shards closed in. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the corridor. Everyone froze. Moments later, one of the revived crew members stumbled into the bay, clutching his head. His eyes were wide with terror, veins bulging unnaturally beneath his skin. Before anyone could react, he collapsed to the floor, convulsing violently. A faint blue glow emanated from his chest, spreading outward until his entire body began to crystallize. "He's been infected," Mira gasped, backing away instinctively. The man let out another guttural scream before going still. His body shattered into shards of crystal, which immediately reformed into smaller versions of the shards. They scuttled forward, their movements jerky yet purposeful. "Everyone, move," Alara shouted, drawing her sidearm. Shots rang out as the team fired at the creatures, shattering them one by one. But for every shard destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "We can't fight them here," Jarek yelled, grabbing the disruptor. "We need to get this thing operational now." Mira grabbed a portable power core and connected it to the device. "It's ready. Just give me 10 seconds to calibrate." Alara scanned the room, her mind racing. The shards were closing in from all sides, their numbers growing exponentially. She made a split-second decision. "Jarek, cover us." Mira finished the calibration. "I'll hold them off." Before either could protest, she stepped into the corridor, weapon raised. The sight that greeted her was horrifying. Dozens of crystalline forms advancing steadily, their edges glinting menacingly in the dim light. Behind them trailed more infected humans, their bodies contorted in agony as they transformed into hosts for the hive mind. Alara opened fire, her shots precise but futile against the overwhelming tide. One by one, the shards closed the distance, forcing her to retreat step by step. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to falter. "Not yet." "Mira, hurry," she called over her shoulder. A moment later, a loud hum filled the air. The disruptor activated, emitting a high-pitched frequency that reverberated through the ship. The shards froze mid-motion, their glowing cores flickering erratically. Then, with a deafening crack, they shattered into dust. For a brief moment, silence fell. Alara slumped against the wall, breathing heavily. It had worked, but at what cost? As the others joined her, Rennick appeared, his face pale but resolute. "That was close," he said quietly. "Too close." Ilara nodded, her gaze fixed on the empty corridor. The shards were gone. For now. But she knew this victory was only temporary. Whatever secrets the fleet held, the enemy would come back for them. And next time, humanity might not be so lucky. The aftermath of the disruptor's activation left the fleet eerily quiet. Shattered fragments of the shards lay scattered across the corridors, glittering faintly under the dim emergency lights. The crew moved cautiously through the ships, ensuring no trace of the crystalline invaders remained. For now, the immediate threat had been neutralized, but the cost was etched into every face. Bodies of both modern humans and revived crew members lay where they had fallen, some still frozen in poses of terror as their bodies began to crystallize. Ilara stood on the bridge of the flagship, staring at the holographic displays that showed the surrounding space. The red giant star loomed nearby, its dying light casting a somber glow over the scene. She felt hollow, her mind replaying the moments when the shards overwhelmed their defenses. They had survived this encounter, but it was clear they couldn't rely on luck alone. Admiral Rennick approached silently, his expression grim. "We stopped them this time," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But the shards will adapt. They always do." Ilara nodded, turning to face him. "Then we need more than just a temporary solution. We need to understand what they're after, and why they targeted us specifically." Rennick hesitated before speaking. "There's something you should see, something I've kept hidden, even from my own crew." Curiosity replaced Ilara's fatigue. "What is it?" Without another word, Rennick led her deeper into the ship, past damaged corridors and flickering lights. They reached a heavily fortified door marked with strange symbols, different from the ones they'd seen elsewhere. Rennick placed his hand on a biometric scanner embedded in the wall. After a moment, the door slid open with a hiss, revealing a chamber unlike any other. Inside was a massive vault-like structure surrounded by intricate machinery. At its center floated a glowing orb, pulsating with an otherworldly energy. Holographic projections hovered around it, displaying complex equations and maps of star systems. Mira and Jarek followed close behind, their eyes widening in awe. "What is that?" Mira whispered, stepping closer. "This," Rennick said solemnly, "is the temporal singularity bomb, a weapon designed not just to destroy the shards, but to erase them from existence entirely." Jarek frowned, examining the device. "Erase them? How does that work?" "It collapses space-time around them," Rennick explained. "By targeting the moment they first emerge, we can undo their creation. But activating it comes at a price. The energy required would destabilize the fleet. Everyone here would be caught in the blast radius." A tense silence fell over the group. Ilara stared at the orb, her thoughts racing. This was the ultimate weapon, a chance to end the war once and for all. But could she justify sacrificing an entire fleet, and possibly herself, to achieve victory? Mira broke the silence, her voice trembling. "If we use this, everything we've done, everyone who fought to survive, it'll all be gone." Rennick placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good. Humanity's survival depends on it." Ilara shook her head, her resolve hardening. "No, there has to be another way. If we destroy ourselves along with the shards, then what legacy will we leave behind? What hope will future generations have if we give up everything?" Rennick studied her, his eyes filled with conflicting emotions. Finally, he sighed. "You're right. Maybe there's another option, but finding it won't be easy." As they discussed their next steps, none of them noticed a faint shimmer in the corner of the chamber, a single shard of crystal, nearly invisible, absorbing data from the holograms. The shards weren't finished yet, and deep within the heart of the ancient fleet, secrets long buried were beginning to resurface. The discovery of the temporal singularity bomb had shifted the mood aboard the fleet. The weight of its potential and its cost hung over everyone like a storm cloud. While Admiral Rennick argued for using the weapon as humanity's last stand, Ilara and her team insisted on exploring alternatives. Tensions flared once again, threatening to undo the fragile unity they'd managed to build. To bridge the gap between the two groups, Mira proposed a radical idea: simulated battles based on ancient tactics recovered from the fleet's archives. "If we're going to fight together," she explained during an emergency meeting in the flagship's war room, "we need to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. These simulations will help us learn how the ancients fought the shards, and maybe give us new strategies." Rennick crossed his arms, skeptical but intrigued. "You think playing games will prepare us for what's coming?" "It's not just about preparation," Ilara interjected. "It's about trust. We've been divided since the moment we met. If we're going to survive, we need to act as one crew, not two." Reluctantly, Rennick agreed. Over the next few days, the combined forces of the modern humans and the revived crew gathered in the fleet's virtual training chambers. Powered by advanced neural interfaces, the simulations placed them in hyper-realistic scenarios where they faced waves of shards under varying conditions. Each session tested their coordination, adaptability, and resolve. At first, the exercises were chaotic. The revived crew relied on outdated formations and brute force, while the modern humans favored precision strikes and technology-driven tactics. Miscommunication led to failures, and tempers often boiled over. But as the sessions continued, something remarkable began to happen. Slowly, bonds formed between the two factions. During one particularly grueling simulation, Captain Vera found herself partnered with Jarek to defend a crumbling outpost against an overwhelming shard assault. At first, their differing approaches clashed. Vera wanted to hold the line at all costs, while Jarek pushed for strategic retreats to conserve resources. But when a sudden breach forced them to improvise, they discovered that combining their methods yielded unexpected success. "Not bad for a tech head," Vera admitted afterward, extending a hand to help Jarek up from the simulated rubble. Jarek grinned despite himself, "And not bad for someone who's been asleep for 1,000,000 years." Moments like these became more frequent as the training intensified. Even Rennick softened slightly, working closely with Ilara to refine strategies. Together, they devised a daring plan to lure the shards into a trap using the fleet itself as bait. By broadcasting a powerful signal mimicking the energy signature of the temporal singularity bomb, they hoped to draw the enemy into a remote nebula filled with volatile gas clouds, perfect for ambushes. But doubts lingered. As the final preparations were made, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking blindly into another disaster. She voiced her concerns to Mira late one night as they reviewed data in the engineering bay. "What if this doesn't work?" Ilara asked quietly. "What if we're underestimating the shards again?" Mira looked up from her console, her expression thoughtful. "Then we'll face whatever comes next, together. That's what makes us stronger than our ancestors. We're not fighting alone anymore." Ilara nodded, drawing strength from Mira's words. Outside, the stars shimmered coldly against the void. Somewhere out there, the shards waited, patient and relentless. Humanity's fate rested on the choices they would make, and the unity they had forged in the face of extinction. Unbeknownst to them, however, a single shard hidden within the flagship continued to absorb information. Its faint glow pulsed rhythmically, feeding data back to the hive mind. The shards weren't just coming, they were learning. And when they arrived, they would be ready. The plan was set, but the tension aboard the fleet was palpable. Every member of the crew knew the stakes. This was their last stand. If the ambush failed, there would be no second chances. The shards were relentless, and humanity's survival depended on a gamble that could either save them all or destroy everything. As the fleet approached the nebula, a swirling mass of fiery gas and cosmic debris, Ilara stood on the bridge of the flagship, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing their formation. Behind her, Admiral Rennick oversaw the deployment of decoy signals designed to mimic the energy signature of the temporal singularity bomb. It was a risky move. If the shards didn't take the bait, the fleet would be exposed and vulnerable. Broadcasting now, Jarek announced from his station, his fingers flying over the controls. A faint hum resonated through the ship as the signal went live. Moments later, sensors detected movement at the edge of the nebula. Jagged crystalline shapes emerged from subspace, their blue glow cutting through the haze like predatory eyes. "They're here," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the knot tightening in her stomach. "Prepare for engagement." The shards moved with terrifying speed, their forms shifting and splitting as they closed in on the fleet. Laser turrets roared to life, unleashing torrents of energy that shattered dozens of shards into glittering dust. But for every one destroyed, two more took its place. The enemy seemed endless, their hive mind adapting to each new tactic almost instantly. "Hold the line." Rennick barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. He had taken command of the defensive perimeter, directing salvos of fire with precision honed by centuries of warfare. Even so, the strain was evident on his face. This wasn't just another battle. It was a test of wills. Inside the nebula, the volatile gases began reacting to the intense heat of the conflict. Explosions rippled outward, sending shockwaves through the fleet. Ships rocked violently as their shields absorbed wave after wave of attacks. In the chaos, communication channels crackled with desperate voices. "This isn't working," Captain Vera shouted over the comms. "They're overwhelming us. We can't retreat now." Ilara replied firmly. "Keep pushing them deeper into the nebula. We need to collapse the gas clouds around them." Mira monitored the environmental readings from the engineering bay, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The gas density is reaching critical levels. One more surge, and we might be able to trigger a chain reaction." Jarek nodded grimly, inputting commands into the console. "Activating overload sequence. Everyone hold on tight." Outside, the fleet unleashed its final barrage, a concentrated burst of energy directed at the heart of the shard swarm. The impact ignited the surrounding gases, creating a massive explosion that engulfed the enemy. For a moment, it seemed like victory, but then something unexpected happened. Amidst the inferno, a single shard remained intact, its core glowing brighter than ever. It pulsed rhythmically, emitting a low-frequency vibration that resonated through space. The fleet shuddered as the signal spread, corrupting systems and infecting organic matter aboard nearby ships. "They're not done," Rennick growled, gripping the railing as alarms blared. "That thing, it's controlling them." Ilara turned to him, her expression resolute. "We can't let it escape. Activate the singularity bomb. Now." Rennick hesitated, then nodded. "Understood. I'll stay behind to ensure it detonates properly." "No," Ilara said sharply. "You've already sacrificed enough. I'll do it." Before anyone could argue, she sprinted toward the chamber housing the bomb, leaving the others stunned. As she reached the device, she activated the countdown. Outside, the surviving ships fled the nebula just as the bomb exploded, collapsing space-time in a brilliant flash of light. When the dust settled, the shards were gone, but so was Ilara. On board the retreating fleet, silence fell as everyone processed what had been lost and gained. Humanity had survived, but the scars of war ran deep, and somewhere in the void, a single shard drifted silently, waiting for its chance to strike again. The fleet limped back toward Earth, its ships battered and scarred from the battle that had nearly cost them everything. The nebula's fiery embrace had erased the shards, or so they hoped, but victory came at a heavy price. Captain Ilara Voss was gone, her sacrifice ensuring the survival of humanity. Her name echoed through every corridor, whispered with reverence and sorrow. On board the flagship, Admiral Cal Rennick stood alone on the observation deck, staring out at the endless void. His hands rested on the railing, knuckles white, as he gripped it tightly. The weight of loss pressed down on him, not just Ilara, but all those who had fallen in the fight against the shards. He felt a strange mix of pride and guilt. Their unity had saved them, but he couldn't shake the feeling that more could have been done. "She believed in us," Mira said softly, stepping onto the deck behind him. Her voice broke the silence like a fragile thread. "Ilara trusted that we could find another way. And because of her, we did." Rennick turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "She gave up everything for people she barely knew, for a future she would never see." His voice cracked slightly. "I don't know if I could have done the same." Mira placed a gentle hand on his arm. "But you stayed when you could have left. You fought alongside us, even when you didn't trust us. That counts for something." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the ship filled the space between them, a reminder of how far they'd come, and how much further they still had to go. The revived crew and the modern humans had forged bonds stronger than anyone thought possible. Shared pain had united them, creating a new chapter in humanity's story. As they approached Earth, the fleet sent ahead a transmission detailing their journey, the discovery of the ancient fleet, the awakening of a forgotten war, and the ultimate sacrifice made to protect the galaxy. When they finally entered orbit, they were greeted not with fear or suspicion, but with awe and gratitude. News of their triumph spread quickly, sparking celebrations across planets and colonies. Humanity's spirit soared once again, ignited by tales of courage and resilience. In the weeks that followed, the knowledge gained from the ancient fleet sparked a renaissance of innovation. Scientists studied the recovered technology, uncovering secrets that pushed humanity's understanding of science and engineering to unprecedented heights. Historians worked tirelessly to piece together the lost chapters of human history, ensuring that the legacy of those who came before would never be forgotten. Yet amidst the triumph, questions lingered. What had become of the last remaining shard? Was it truly destroyed, or was it lying dormant, waiting for its next move? Admiral Rennick refused to let his guard down, insisting that humanity prepare for whatever might come next. One evening, as he stood beneath the stars, he felt a faint whisper in his mind. A memory, perhaps, or a promise. It was Ilara's voice, clear and unwavering. "Hope endures." Rennick smiled faintly, lifting his gaze to the heavens. Somewhere out there, among the infinite expanse of stars, humanity's story continued. They had faced extinction and emerged stronger, united not by bloodlines or borders, but by shared purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And somewhere deep in the cosmos, the ghostly echoes of Ilara's final act served as a beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope endured.